Welcome to the Caribbean Edge. Tonight, I'm here to talk to you about imperfection. I do have three phenomenal men with me, three strong men that are going to take us on their personal journey with imperfection, with addiction. So we want you to share this episode. My name is Dawn Wilson, and welcome to the Caribbean Edge. I want to first welcome Mr. Rob DiMeo. This is his second time on the Caribbean Edge. Welcome again, Rob.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. And Mr. Corey Milton joins us again. He was on last week on our Brotherhood episode and made quite an impression on our viewers as well. So we're so happy to have you back, Corey. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Mr. Lazarus Booker, your first time on the Caribbean Edge. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Dawn. It's an honor to be here tonight.
Thank you. And I know this is a very deep and personal conversation for all three of you. So let's start with Lazarus. Tell us about you, where you're from, and what you want to share with us as far as how you got started with addiction.
Well, first of all, I was born. I'm the only child, and I came from a pretty much wealthy, not rich, but a wealthy, well-off family. But I was raised by my mother and my grandmother, and like I said, I was the only child. I was basically spoiled by them. I got any and everything I wanted. There was nothing that I couldn't ask for and couldn't get. And as I was growing up, the neighborhood that I was in, like I said, I'm from Forest Park, Georgia. The neighborhood is not a ran down neighborhood, or it's not poor. A lot of times we get that impression that that's where a lot of these things come from. It wasn't that type of neighborhood, but it was a real close-knit neighborhood, so things could be seen easily. And probably around the age of 13 and 14, that's when cocaine really was sweeping in 1983, 84. And I would see the older guys, maybe around 19, 20 years old, in my neighborhood, riding around in these cars and the gold jewelry on them. And although I was getting any and everything that I asked for, that looked appealing to me, to see them doing those things. And my school was actually right up the hill. And when I would go to school when I was 15 years old, I would walk to school. And I would find myself skipping school just to hang out, just to watch them and look at them. And eventually, one of them, I won't mention any names or anything, gave me some to sell. And I started doing it at my school. 15 years old. There were 15-year-old and 14-year-old students at my school snorting cocaine. So this is not new. And I would be selling it to them, and I was selling a lot. And then when they wouldn't have money, they would get their parents' jewelry, give it to me, and I would give it to the guy. And eventually, as years went on, I introduced my other cousins around the neighborhood to selling drugs. They didn't have a reason to sell either, but I introduced them to selling drugs, and we all just started selling like a lot of drugs. And that led for me to get deeper. And along with selling drugs, which started off as just something to do, led to me getting an addiction from it. So yes, it was all fun and games at first, but then I got addicted to cocaine. And I didn't look at it as an addiction then, because of when you're making a whole lot of money, and there's no excuse of not being a junkie or being addicted. You're addicted. But we felt like we was making all this money that it wasn't a problem because we could support our habit. And that's all it was. We were supporting an addiction. We weren't the ones who didn't have the money to get it. And I lost a lot of things, which we'll probably talk about later. I was married. I lost my family from it. I got 4 kids. So I lost my marriage behind it, more or less before the addiction, with just the selling the drugs, and which led to the addiction. So I lost a lot of things when I was out there addicted. So
I want to take you back to your childhood, Lazarus. Thanks for sharing and for being so open and honest about that. So you had a middle class life, you should say, and parents that cared about you?
a lot.
A lot. So there was no lack of love, no abuse at home. Tell us about when you were impressed with all the worldly goods out there and what other people had. So tell us, once you started that, you're in school. So what happened to your schoolwork? What were your parents saying to you? Did they know, or you just hit it really well?
No, I didn't hit it really well. So my grandmother really raised me. My mom, she ended up getting married and moved to College Park. So I was still staying in Forest Park so I could go to school in Clayton County. And like I said, I was 15, so I was in like the 7th grade. And my grandmother, she worked at the school also. So I couldn't miss a day because she would notice it. But all I would have to do is, when I went to school, is go to lunch because she worked in the cafeteria. The rest of my day, I would leave. But Dawn, here's the thing. I wasn't illiterate. I wasn't dumb. I was very, very intelligent. I made straight A's. Even the small time that I spent in school, I retained information well enough to remember when we take the test, I'll ace the test. So I retained information. So it didn't look as though I was doing anything wrong because my report cards were showing straight A's. My grandmother would see me at school, but every single day I'm in a neighborhood selling drugs. Now, the only thing done that really started catching up with me was maybe when I was 16, my mom would still come to the house, to my grandmother's house every week, and she would put my clothes out. I know it sounds funny, but she would put my clothes out every day of the week. But I was making money, so I was buying Polo, Troop, Felines, all this extra high price stuff. And I would be wearing it to school and would have to come back to school, change into what she laid out just in case she would come home. So I was hiding clothes everywhere. And after a while, it got to a point to where I wasn't hiding anymore. When I was 17, which I would have been graduating, I just went ahead and quit. I didn't tell anyone I was quitting. I just stopped going to school. And my parents did find out. My mom found out and my grandmother found out, but it's not that they couldn't say anything to me because I was very respectful to them, but I don't think it would have really mattered to me. I would have found some type of way because I had started loving that lifestyle out there in the streets.
Thank you, thank you. Rob, how did you get started?
So for me, I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts. I come from a single family household with a severely bipolar mother doing the best that she could to provide for her and her kid. I had an abusive alcoholic father who used to beat the bag out of me and my mother all the time. She did her best to get away from him and get custody away from me. We moved into right outside of Boston, into a 3-family house where the neighbor in that house used to like to touch me when I was a kid. So I feel I was predisposed to the disease of addiction a lot early on than most kids. And I didn't fit in with the kids that were around me. And I had these feelings that made me feel different, like I didn't fit in or I didn't belong. And I gravitated towards an older crowd. And that older crowd that I gravitated towards was doing things a kid my age should never have been doing. And when I took that first one, whether it be, It was drinking, it was marijuana, it was cocaine, it was ecstasy, it was Oxycontin. When I took that first one, the first one took me outside myself. And I didn't feel so different. You know what I mean? I was able to fit in where I needed to fit in. I didn't have to deal with the pain and the hurt and the feelings that I ran around with as a kid. And I took that and I ran with it. And that's how I started with my disease of addiction.
Thank you. So tell us about you, Rob. I missed that part of it. Tell us who you are and where you're from.
So I'm sorry, I got a little distracted with my phone. I'm working too at the same time. So I'm Rob Demio. I am from Boston, Massachusetts, and I'm a grateful recovering heroin addict. And I'm also the community outreach coordinator for Sunrise Detox. And what I do with at work and with my life is I give back to people who are just like me, who may be struggling in silence, too afraid to reach out and ask for help. And I help them find the help that was given to me for me to get my life back from my disease of addiction. So I help people get into treatment. I help people find resources in my community, in my state, and actually across the country when they want to stop using the drugs that are destroying their life.
Thank you. So did you have any fear at all, like fear of dying, fear of?
Yeah. So my story continues. I lived to use and used to live for years and years and years. My disease of addiction brought me to some of the darkest edges of the city of Boston. And, you know, I was facing legal issues. I've overdosed numerous times. I've been in and out of substance abuse treatment for years and years and years. I'd walk into a detox, I'd leave, I'd get to a certain point in treatment, I would leave. I'd be back out there ripping and running. And my runs usually ended the same way. They ended in overdoses and handcuffs. The runs started getting shorter and shorter and shorter. The drugs started to get less and less and less. And I kept finding myself back in the same position over and over again.
So if you can remember back to the first overdose, describe that to us. What happened and wasn't that a tough enough lesson there?
I would like to say it was, but it wasn't. The way I was on a mission. I didn't care whether I lived or I died. And my drug of choice was more of anything that took me outside myself, anything that didn't make me feel the feelings that I had inside. I had no real reason why I got high. I got high because I was sad. I got high because the sun came out. I got high because it was Christmas Eve. I just used. What I didn't realize until I got clean, the real reason why I was using was because I didn't like who I was. I started using because I came with a lot of trauma that was I never addressed. I came with a lot of work that needed to be done. And I didn't know how to begin doing that work to start my process of recovery. So when I went back to that first overdose, it was basically with my drug of choice being more, I did too much heroin and I went out and I pretty much slipped into a respiratory depression, and the people that I was with decided they were going to use Narcan and bring me back. And because my mind was so diseased up, I spent 4 hours in an emergency room being monitored and waited and just being watched, that I went right back out to the same drug dealer doing the same things.
Wow. Thank you. So Lazarus, let me ask you, were you ever fearful?
There was one time, Don. I mean, is anyone to tell you who's in the streets? I don't care how tough you think you are or how bad you think you are. The streets don't care anything about you. And that's something I did learn. And there have been many encounters of when we would rob people, kick in doors, that we could have been killed. But there was one time I was just listening to Rob when he was talking about one of his OD episodes. I was in a room in a hotel one day. No one really knows much about this but the people around me. And we actually threw a cocaine party. I know we probably had a couple of ounces of cocaine, and we were all in the room. The guys, we were all in the room. We was just snorting and talking. And Don, I sat in the corner. I had snorted so much cocaine that I couldn't even sniff. I couldn't even inhale any more cocaine. I had snorted so much. And I sat in between the hotel room beds, and I was looking at everybody in that room, and they were walking around, they were talking, but I couldn't hear anything. And I was looking, and I heard something say, Lazarus, you're gonna die. I heard that voice and I was just looking. And that day, that morning, I said, you know, I'm done with this, you know. I'm finished snorting cocaine. This is it for me. But as soon as I got back to the neighborhood, I got me another 50 of cocaine and started right back. So that was the most fearful I was at my point of when I was out there in the streets doing these different things. But even that didn't scare me enough to stop.
Okay. Wow. Corey, you have a completely different story here than Rob and Lazarus. So tell us about who you are, where you're from, and also, you know, just your connection or your, how you know about drugs, how it impacted your life, I should say.
Thank you very much. I'm Corey Milton. I'm from Augusta, Georgia. As I said before, I've been in Atlanta since like 2000, 2001, if I can remember back. How drugs impacted my life, and these are all very, very impactful stories, guys. It's funny, it's sadly I can say every time I hear this story from you or Rob or Lazarus, it's like I'm right there. I resonate so well because I've seen my dad, my uncles, my cousins go through it, where family is selling to family, and it gets bad in our community. But for me, my story is a little different because drugs impacted my life through my father. And my father introduced drugs to my mother. Cocaine, drug of choice, 80s crack was the biggest in the 80s, as Lazarus speaks about. Whereas it was so much drug use and drug chasing until I was left to be raised by my grandparents. My mom and dad was, flying to New York and living a lifestyle that they needed to get the things that they wanted to satisfy self. Well, the way it impacted me, it left me alone. I was with my grandparents, I was alone. And this for all the parents that have kids, and maybe you don't see it this way, but I always been alone. I was an only child. I was thrust into the world with my grandparents, who was way too old to be raising a young teenager. And all of my life, I've been walking myself to school. I got a lot of guys I hear say, my brother had my back, or my friend my back, my cousin, I had my own back. Either I fought and won, or I fought and lost. I fought every day going to school. I had to, and I had no protection, no backing, no nothing. I felt so unloved for most of my adolescent life. And I really never opened up like this to people about how I got here. Because as the saying goes, the further you look back, the further forward you will see. That impacted me in a way where I'm a words person, for my love language. My wife now knows I'm a words person. She's an acts of service person. There's words you can say to me that can attack me like you just hit me in my face, because everything I've been through throughout my life. It also impacted me. I will never quit a job, because whatever I get involved in, I'm there till it burns down, or you get rid of me. I have what they call separation anxiety. People have left me for years, my entire life. I live with family, I live with grandparents and my young life, and I always was the one on the couch. And the fear in my life was, if the house ever got too crowded, I was the one that had to go. If there wasn't enough food, I was the one that didn't eat, because I was the one that really, really, really wasn't family, so to speak. And it impacted my life. And I have a wonderful young lady in my life now who can just pull back those peels off the onion to really get to the root of some of our issues. And I just thank God for her because, you know, I probably would have never found out that you've been affected what happened to you 30 years ago. You know, you're bringing that baggage to me, to us, and we're better than that. And most people give up on you. And in my life, I've been in relationships where people have given up, you know, because of what, you know, what I brought to the table from my past life. Now, a lot of me is obviously good, you know, but those demons have always been there because if you don't have the proper counseling and help for those stuff to talk it out, it just lies dormant in you. So the drug use of my mother and my father impacted my life by just being, you know, alone. If I had a title of a book or a illustration of a cover of a book, it's a little boy just standing by the ocean by itself. And that was 20 years of my life, you know, as a young man, because my dad and mother wasn't there. Subsequently, my dad's way of life ended up him in prison. My mother's way of life ended up her dead, you know, because my dad went to prison. She started dating another young man and he ended up murdering her. I've watched my dad, I can take you back and vaguely see my dad abuse my mother physically. I saw him run her over with a car. I was in the back seat of a red Cadillac. I remember it like it was yesterday. A lot of terrible things I've seen that were bad things, but the thing about those things, they impacted me in how I moved inadvertently, you know, and I didn't learn that for a long time. Most of my relationships, this is my second marriage. So my first marriage, I just went through like I was just right, but I wasn't. But I had not got the proper help that I needed to talk it out and figure out what made me feel the way I feel. I always been on the defense as an adult. Why is that? Because people were always coming after me when I was a young child because I had no protection. Fathers, listen to me. If you don't stand and show up for your son, he will feel alone his whole life. He too then will not show up for his son. He too then will make those mistakes. You can say what you want to say, but it's in you. You know, until somebody talk it out and help you understand better how to deal with it, it's in you. So most of my life, I've been just flying by the seat of my pants and getting through until I met this wonderful lady who's, as I said before, peeled that onion, you know, and say, you know what, I see what's going on here and I'm not going to quit on you like everybody else have. And that circles me back to football. One of the things that kept me going, man, I love sports. I was really good at sports, but I didn't love sports so much because of the ball being thrown around. I love sports so much because they came with dads, you know, coaches. They paid attention. They showed affection. They liked me. And as soon as I found out they liked me because I could play, but it was okay. I didn't care. They still was giving me attention as a man. Yes, let me say it again. Women are amazing, but those boys need their fathers. They need their father to say, hey, that's my boy. I never had that. I was really, really good at football, high school, college. My dad never seen me play once. He called, not in person, he called me one time and said, I saw you play football once on television from prison. He never, these guys, Rob and Lazarus, you're men. What guy, what boy doesn't want his dad to see him score touchdowns and do all these wonderful tough guy things? It just has to happen. And it never happened. So I came back to football because football, I always tell my boys, my players, that football saved my life. Because in football, in school, you had to have the grades to stay on the team. And it goes back to my separation anxiety. I didn't want to be part of the way for my team because that was my family. So I made the grades that got me through high school, that got me through college because I had to have the grades to continue to play. As I go through high school, 9th grade, my mother's ended up getting murdered by this guy she's met. You know, I often look him up. He's still in jail at the time. He's up for parole now, actually. mother got killed in 1994. And for many years, I blocked that out to move on with life. But until you deal with it, you're never going to heal from it, you know? So I feel like through football, I could reach a lot of guys. And I have 83 guys on my roster in my men's league. And I did a poll for them last year, and 85% of those guys grew up without their father. That's a big disparity, you know? And so when I saw that, that told me they need what I needed. And I'm going to be that for them, you know? I'm going to be that for them.
Thank you, Coy. And thank you for being open, honest, and for allowing us to connect to that. So many children, whether you're a boy or a girl, feel abandoned at some point. And that's why this episode is certainly called Imperfection and No Perfect People Allowed. Because we've all been broken or disappointed or hurt at some point. And a lot of what you're saying, even though I'm a female, I can resonate. It resonates with me. And I'm sure our viewers as well, because I come from a broken home. I come from a home with a very abusive dad. I've spoken openly about that and being an abused child and what that looks like. And to me, it's so deep. You don't think about it because you've moved on with your life and you do what you need to do to survive. But when you first start talking about it publicly, I broke down in tears. It was like, wow, this really impacted me beyond anything that I can imagine. And boys do need their dads and their mothers as well, even though you separated in life. So I am deeply saddened with your mom. And I'm so thankful that you found a beautiful wife who can peel back those onions and be by your side. And I know you mentioned her previously. And it is about relationships and meeting the right person to love and care for you so you can be a better father to your child as well. So thank you. Lazarus, anything resonates with you?
I agree with Corey, especially when he's talking about broken homes. Even though I didn't come from a broken home, but with my ministry that I have, I am swag. I deal with a lot of urban youth and a lot of underprivileged youth. And when I say underprivileged, I don't mean that they're just poor, down and out. They're missing something in their lives. Okay, that's all I'm saying. Whether it be a single parent or whether it be just no sense of direction, or what I do notice when the youth are coming from these broken homes, they tend to, when we say that they're out of control, the only thing they're looking for is approval. That's all they're looking for, because the place on where they're supposed to be getting it, which is at home, is not there. And especially now. That's why I focus my ministry so much on youth and young adults, because of the world, how the world is now. The world actually draws families apart, requiring parents to have to work all the time, and no one being there for these children. And when there's no guidance, youth will seek out whatever. A lot of the youth that I deal with, they're selling drugs. They were younger than me, 12 years old, in the projects, selling drugs, using drugs. And when I do talk to them, I never judge them. That's the first thing. I never judge them because first, I don't even know where all this came from. Just like Corey was saying, I heard that he's been married twice. So he was saying that his marriage was affected by his rearing up of his parents. And if you don't know the root cause of it, that problem will go throughout your whole life. So I think the main thing for us is when we're finding these individuals, whether it's youth, adults, or whoever, whenever we do encounter them, let's not just talk about their problem and what they're doing. Let's just find out where all this is coming from. Find out some history about it. And that's the only way we can do that is meet them where they're at and lend an ear, listen.
Okay. Corey, what made you be so strong? Like, what made you not get involved in drugs? I mean, you lost your mom and you were a lonely child. No one there to love you as far back as you can remember. No one had your back. How do you survive that as a child growing up?
Sports. It was sports.
But what happens after sports?
Well, the thing about sports, specifically speaking, football, it's a life skills type of activity. Hard work paying off. Working together as a team. You work hard, you win. Those things were embedded in me throughout my career playing sports. I took those things on into my life and applied them to my life, and they work. Sports was the pinnacle of that. Obviously, first and foremost, God. Sports kept me out the street. It kept me away from drugs. I mean, I knew drugs, but I wasn't into drugs because I remember my senior year in high school, we had just lost the state championship down in Thomas County Central. And for the first time in my life, I was going home after school. Like, first time in my high school, grade school career, I was actually, when the bell rung, I was getting on a bus to go home. I never had done that because I was always going to an extracurricular activity, whether it was football, basketball, or baseball. It kept me straight, which is why I put it on my kids so hard. My grandmother always told me, I don't mind the devil's workshop. You know, you got to be doing something or something gonna be doing you. And so I push it on my kids. I push it on kids that are not my kids. Get involved in something. It may lead you somewhere else. I didn't have any idea it would lead me to mentoring youth about life and how to be, but it did. You know, it was just sports. I mean, I loved it so much, and it kept me away from a lot of things that, you know, my quote unquote friends were doing, and that's the number one avenue that basically governed me. One time I tried to join a gang. I tried to do whatever for the love I didn't get. I wasn't getting. It just wasn't something that really resonated with me. But football, it did. You know, I remember one time I joined this gang, and the first day I had initiated, I got beat up. It's a real thing. It's not just in the books. You have to get beat in, and it's blood in, blood out. That's what they say. But the first job I had, when I tell this story to my team, they be like, "What? Like, are you serious?" The first job I had was we had to go to this restaurant where a bunch of these cars were parked, and we had to steal guns for the gang leader. Guns. I'm a young kid. My dad's not around. I have no idea how good or bad it is. I don't know. So we went to this restaurant. Back in the day, if you can remember, in the old school, they had these gun racks in the back of the pickup truck that they hung the guns on. It's old school. And so and I can tell you by the time, nobody locked their cars in these days. They just didn't lock them. Now you got alarms and locks and everything. You didn't have it then. So we walk up to this car while these guys are eating this restaurant, and we go inside this truck and we steal this gun. We take the gun back to the gang leader, what we call base house, and got back to the base house, and the gang leader told me this is the wrong gun. Like, all right, it's the wrong gun. You got to take it back. Hold, take it back? You mean return to the scene of the crime? What, take it back? We took the gun back. Took the gun back, put it back on the rack. As we're leaving out of this, closing the door to go back to where we came from, these white guys just came out shooting at us, like shooting. I'm this close to death, you know, and I didn't even know it, you know. But the impact of you not having your father, having your family, or having that love that you need, you're going to go looking for it, and that's what I was doing. So I had opportunities to get into other stuff, but nothing loved me like football did. And like those coaches, those volunteers, which is why I go hard for any volunteers or any youth organization that's Lazarus was talking about to help young kids. These guys are not getting paid. They're giving their God-given time. And in order for you to do that, you have to have something in you that's making you want to give back. It's not a paycheck. And that's the most pure love you can get.
Thank you. So I imagine after that first incident, that was a wake-up call that the gang life wasn't yours for you.
Right, exactly. Big wake-up call. Dodging. I mean, I think I ended up. My dad was. I was living in the city with my mom. And her family were. Her parents were, and that night I remember running back home, and you know, and Rob and Lazarus will tell you, because we have a different life, you know, than the ladies. We out doing something different. So Rob and Lazarus will tell you there's always a railroad track, right? This side of the track is one thing, and this side of the track is something else. So I ran to go back across the tracks to call my aunt, who was my dad's sister, and let them know what was going on. And they came and got me, and I never went back. From that point, I went to go play football at another high school where I earned a scholarship to go to college and play for Georgia Southern University. My life changed forever at that point. But I got love from his sisters, but it was the same type of love where we love you by default because you're my brother's son, not my child. Now, you're not my child. My brother's son. So we're gonna feed you, but you gotta sit on this couch. If you get too out of line, we're gonna send you back where you came from. And so that's a different kind of love than mama love. My mama told me when I was a little boy, I'm gonna love you right or wrong. That's different.
Yeah.
In spite of, because you mine. So that you mine part, I lost that. You know what I'm saying? So I thank my dad's sisters for taking care of me, taking me and his mother, and it helped me to get on a straighter path of keeping my future in sight. But the lack of love and nurturing from my mother and my father, it impacted me throughout my entire life. So I had the opportunities to go down the wrong path several times. It's just not what I wanted, you know. And I did that seeking something. As Lazarus was talking about, these kids are seeking something. They're seeking an attaboy, approval, love. I see you. So when I see my son acting up because I'm walking his older brother into college at Kennesaw State University. I got 2 kids in college, and I'm walking into school, and my younger son is doing all this crazy stuff trying to get my attention. It's simply because he want to get the level of attention I'm giving his older brother. He just ain't his time yet. You know, and so those things that impact my life negatively, through my wife and counseling, we turn to flip it and get the good out of it, you know, to see how to deal with our own kids and how to love them the way they need to be loved. So it's a two-edged sword. You can definitely look at it from a few different ways, but I tell you, as I talked about last show about the narratives about that we grow up around and taught about how counseling is weak and crying is bad. That's crap. You know, there's nothing better could have happened to me when I got professional counseling, because there's no bias. She's breaking down a math problem. 1 + 1 is 2. 2 + 2 is 4. You did this because of this. This is a doctor. You know, she's telling you, you have separation anxiety. You're a words person. You're defensive, and you can't debate that. These are facts. As Rob talked about it, and let's talk about solutions. You know, and that's the main part.
And I'm glad I call it breaking the cycle. So many of us have to break those cycles in order to give our children a better future. And you certainly sound like an amazing husband now to your wife, as much as she is to you too. But thank you for that. Rob, I want
last night.
Go ahead, Corey.
I came on last night and my wife said this to me on the couch. I'm gonna tell you, it may not mean a whole lot to nobody. She looked at me and she said, she has never said this. Like, she said, "You're the best thing that ever happened to me." And I look at her like, "Why you say that?" Like, but she knows me. She knows I'm a words person. I need to hear that. I need to hear that. When your significant other has a need, the need has to be met. And we get that from counseling. And that's something I've never been told my entire life. You know, as a kid, as an adult. And it's impactful. Words.
Absolutely. Once again, thank you to your beautiful wife out there for her love and support. I tell you, Corey, I have to meet her. And you yourself, you are an amazing man. I mean, just to pour your heart out to us and show us how vulnerable you are and how you could have made different choices and you didn't, despite your personal life, you know, and the future that you want for not just your kids, but other kids as well, is just you breaking that cycle, and the strength of a man is what I see in you. So thank you. Rob, I know you have a painful journey with your mom, losing your mom. So if you can tell us about that and what you were going through at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got myself clean. You know, I went into substance abuse treatment. I put in some time. I did some work. I pulled back that onion. I really looked at myself. I looked at my character defects, the shortcomings, and I learned some tools to carry around in my toolbox for when life shows up. I don't have to run out and get high. In 2018, I was just approaching my 2-year mark of 2 years of continued recovery, you know, no mind or mood altering substances. In April 13th of 2018, I got that call from my uncle, that call that none of us wants to get. I picked up the phone. He told me my mother was dead. Now that's one call to get while I'm, you know, in recovery, you know, working really hard not to get high. But what followed, you know, your mother is dead, kind of like broke me. He continued to go on to tell me that her boyfriend of 15 years decided he was going to kill her. He decided to pick up his drug of choice, which was alcohol. He struggled with his sobriety. He picked up his drug of choice, alcohol. My mom had come home from work on his birthday, April 13th. He turned 50 years old. She had come home from work to check on him on her break. And I guess from, you know, what we gathered now, she told him she was done. It was time to go. She wasn't having it. And he picked up a barbell and he caved my mother's head in. And he, not just once, but he went in on her out of rage. And he left her under a blanket and then took off. My mother's best friend who worked with her at the same nursing home realized my mom was taking too long to come back from break. So she did the right thing, went out there and looked for my mother. She showed up my mother's trailer. She didn't see anything wrong. She walked right by the blanket. She found the pool of blood. She opened the blanket. She found my mom with her head caved in. She alerted the authorities. The authorities came. She said they asked her what's different. She said the 50-year-old boyfriend, he's missing. She gave him, you know, the one option to look for him. That was a local bar around the corner. The cops went down to the local bar. They found my mother's boyfriend, Barrick, with my mother's brain matter embedded into his pants and her blood on his hands. They arrested him, and that's when, you know, a 15-month Capital One murder trial started to roll out. I was faced with so much at the time. I couldn't really understand what was going on with me at the time, but I knew that like I was in for a storm, you know what I mean? And my biggest concern was not to pick back up no matter what. I needed to stay clean. I needed to stay clean no matter what, and I needed to push through this. And turns out, I mean, the relationship my mother had with this man for 15 years. I'm 33 now. I was like 30 when this happened. 15 years. He's been in my life since I was 15. We never got along, you know. At one point, I got too high and was running around an active addiction that I really wasn't paying attention to the signs in my mother's relationship as to what was really going on behind closed doors. And my mother, because of my active addiction, my mother moved from Massachusetts all the way out to Bradenton, Florida. So she didn't have to deal with her son's shenanigans, me getting high, the calls from jail, the calls from treatment, all these different things. As she was my biggest cheerleader when I decided to get clean, you know, I put her through a lot in active addiction and she took off, which I don't blame her at all. And, you know, now this murder trial started and I'm struggling just in general with my own mental health and trying to not stick a needle in my neck and throw away everything that I had worked for, you know. I got 2 years of recovery. I just got a relationship back with my mother. She, you know, a few months prior, I was just down in Florida. She opened her doors for me, which is huge. She cooked me a meal. I wasn't allowed in my mother's house for years. And he took away my biggest fan. He took away my cheerleader. I was her baby boy. She was severely mentally ill, but at the end of the day, she did everything she could to make sure I was taken care of. You know what I mean? There was nothing my mother did or didn't do that put the needle in my neck. You know what I mean? And she knew that before she died. And the one thing I wasn't going to let this man take after taking my mom was my recovery or my clean date. You know what I mean? And I wasn't going back to the same people, same places, same faces, same hood, doing the same things I was doing before. And at this point, like I didn't have anybody. Like I'm an only child too. I suffer with anxiety, you know, separation anxiety, abandonment issues, even more so now after her murder. But I wasn't going backwards. And it was the hardest thing I have ever had to do. It was you know, and having to do it clean was different because I was forced to feel the feelings that's the reason why I use. I don't want to feel anything. And to have to feel the feelings of something like this was intense. It was a lot. I had to reach out for help. I started to sink into a depression. I needed to get on some antidepressants and things like that to kind of help me get through what I was going through. I had to go to court and meet and see my mother's murderer in a case management hearing. And, you know, I went after him in court. I had domestic violence advocates hold me back and keep me from getting myself into trouble. And then, you know, the trial started. I went out there for her trial. It was a good 4 days. And, you know, a jury of 12 of his peers found him, you know, guilty of first-degree capital murder. And he's sitting in a Florida state penitentiary for the rest of his life with no parole option. It left me broken, battered, and beaten, worse than my disease of addiction ever did. I lost my best friend. I lost my mom, you know, my biggest cheerleader. And, you know, I learned that through this process that, like, Rob's going to grow up now. I learned that it's time to put on my big boy pants. There's nobody there to bail my ass out of jail. There's nobody there to bail me out of trouble. There's nobody there to fix my credit. There's nobody there that's going to co-sign my bullshit. You know what I mean? It's like, I only have me right now. And I had to lean on other men in my program of recovery, other people who understood what I was going through, other people that could relate, identify, but not judge or compare. And I needed to really lean on people who really understood that how hard I was fighting for my own life. And, you know, I was able to make it through where it's 2021 now. I made it through the storm. I found the blessings at the end of the storm. Today, like, I don't get high today. I don't put any mind or mood altering substance in my body, but today, like, I'm still available to show up for myself, right? I'm able to show up for my mother, even though she's not here, and be her voice, right? I got plugged in with Laverne Gordon over at the Love Life Now Foundation, who, you know, kind of guided me in this domestic violence direction to be able to stand up, speak up, and tell other men that it's not okay to hit women. It's not okay for, you know, us to degrade women and talk to women certain types of ways. And, you know, I didn't have that growing up. I didn't have my father either. You know what I mean? And when I really got to know Love Life Now Foundation and what was going on and really kind of saw what my mother was going through behind closed doors, I had some character defects I needed to work on too, now that my mother's gone, and how I treat women. And I have, you know what I mean? I've learned so much from my mother's murder, from getting clean, and my life experiences. Like, I actually like the person I am today. You know, I don't wake up wanting to kill myself or hate myself. And, you know, when I wake up and I look in the mirror, I'm not hearing my disease talk to me and tell me I'm a terrible person today. You know, I hear my mother and I know that she's proud of me today. And like my journey and in the journey I'm on, I'm able to help other people who suffered like me. I'm able to help other people who suffered in silence like my mother, right? I'm able to bridge a gap between substance abuse and domestic violence, because the one thing he said to me that this wouldn't have happened if I wasn't drunk. You know what I mean? And at the same time, I can empathize with my mother's murderer, because I've woken up in some jail cells not knowing what the hell I did because I was too high to remember. You know what I mean? But at the same time, too, I got help for my disease before I got to that point. So like, you know, my whole life today is being able to give back to other people who are just like me, knowing that I'm no different. And I'm wicked grateful today that I have everything I have, knowing that I'm just one bad decision away from being right back to where I started. And I'm not going back there, not today, not without my mother. You know what I mean? And that's kind of where I'm at.
Wow, Rob, thank you. Every time you talk about your mom, and I don't know if you realize it, there's this smile that comes on your face. The love you have for her comes through. And I think, as I'm getting teary-eyed already, that she's given you so much power through everything. And at least through everything, you always knew that she loved you no matter what. And her strength and your strength as a man as well. You know, I can't imagine going through your own personal recovery and then losing your mom, and the strength it must have taken for you to pull yourself through, and for you to sit here today and have this conversation with us. It means that people are going through these rough times. You can get through it. That's what Absolutely. It says to us.
I don't have any advice to offer. I don't have any advice to give anybody. All I have is my own experience. I've been homeless, jobless. I've been sexually abused, beaten. All I can do is, share my experience and just hope that, if I can break my silence, speak up and talk about some of the things that I've moved past, some of the things that I've survived, that it will give somebody the strength or the courage to raise their hand and ask for and say the words that saved my life. I need help. And to have those resources to provide to somebody who's in a domestic violence situation, who's struggling with substance abuse. These guys have some resources for youths that are struggling, coming from the same neighborhoods that they come from. To have those resources and facilitate them helps me stay clean on a daily basis.
Absolutely. And you are impacting so much change in all of us. And I know this episode will be shared for generations, because it's so impactful and so significant, because these are real stories. This is real life. I don't even want to call them stories. It's your journey that you've gone through it, and you're willing to share it. You're willing to be vulnerable to all of us, to say, I did this, and take responsibility. However, this is where I am today, and that you can't replace it, because there's no textbook. It's what you guys are here saying tonight. And there's no bigger truth than this. Lazarus, I want to ask you, who have you hurt and why, and anything you want to say around that?
During my journey in the streets and doing all the mishaps, I've hurt millions of, well, not millions of people, but I've hurt many people. My kids, my wife. And just recently, I was talking to my mom, and she was telling me about, we have a cousin who does hair back in the days, right? And she just recently told me, she said, when I used to go to the shop, the lady who does her hair, which is our cousin, would say things like, you need to come get your son. He out here all in the streets, snorting cocaine and selling dope. And my mom said it would make her mad. But when I was listening to my mom, like, this is recent, I'm 48, this is recent, I can hear the hurt, and I started feeling the hurt, because when I was out in the streets and doing everything I was doing, I really wasn't paying attention to nothing else around me, nothing that cared for me. It was about whatever was around me at that time. And the things that were around me were doing the same thing. And it got to a point to where I couldn't even hear when help was being offered from family. So this is one thing I do want to point out. When I was in the streets, how everybody talking about they have their little circles. Oh, I got my little circle. Well, my circle was doing the exact same thing that I was doing. So I wasn't going to get any help. I wasn't going to come out. I was going to still be in that circle. What I had was a corner with family members, my aunt, my grandmother, the ones who I knew I were hurting, but was still praying and still talking to me like what they saw me doing, they were acting like it, they didn't see it, even though they can see me falling and dying right in front of their face, but they didn't make it known. They would just speak encouraging words and speak life to me every time I would come by. And I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful that I had a corner, just like in a boxing ring. We got our circle. If I'm in there boxing, I'm fighting life. I'm boxing life. I got a circle out there around the ring cheering and doing all this. And when I'm getting beat by life, they can't do anything because they're outside in that ring. But after round one, there's a corner I can walk back to. And that's what really helped me, my corner, my family. And I'm a Christian. I just want to make that known. And my parents are Christians. And my mother, my grandmother, and my aunt are some praying women. And just today, I just want to let anybody who's watching this to know, no matter what you go through in life, no matter addictions, your imperfections, the domestic abuse, the child, whatever it is, know that prayer works. It works. It works. Somebody was praying for us. All these guys on here today, it was someone praying for us. I promise you. Although it felt like I was doing this alone and it didn't have nobody out there with me because everything around me was centered around what I was doing, I did have that corner praying for me. And the ones that I couldn't see that I was hurting were also praying for me. So yes, I did hurt some people, but those same people believed in me enough to keep praying for me.
Thank you. And I'm glad you had that corner, Lazarus, because even though you were making your own choices, you always knew you had that praying family there for when you needed to find them, you could. So thank you for all your praying family as well. I just want to thank the viewers who are tuning in tonight. I see Joan Virtue Taylor said, I'm so moved by the journey of these three brothers and to see how their narrative has been rewritten. Bridget Thompson says, God is truly amazing. Thanks for sharing your story. Sharita Sutton, this is an amazing show tonight. Just want to thank everyone that's watching, even if you're not saying anything. And Sharita said, bring it home, cousin. Prayer changes things. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I just want to talk about, want you all to summarize, if anything, you would give any of us advice, no matter what we're struggling with in life, because we all have so much we're struggling with. As Rob mentioned, we have Ms. Laverne Dara there who is working on the domestic violence and which is so important. And of course, drugs and alcohol certainly impacts us with domestic violence. We're seeing with COVID-19 as well, where I'm sure the numbers are going up with, just addiction and alcohol and domestic violence as well. So tell us, what would you say to people going through a rough time? I want you to think about everything you've gone through in life, and you've said a lot of it already, but what would you say to them, pulls you through? I know one message I'm getting from all three of you is that just the belief you have in yourself and in God. So let's start with Rob.
I guess what I would say is that everybody's recovering from something, that the idea of recovery starts when we have the thought that we want to recover from what it is that we're struggling with. And for me, the only way for me to recover was to become honest, open-minded, and willing to start the healing process. So raising our hand and asking for help and breaking our silence and talking about it has what's worked for me.
Thank you. And tell us about your program again. Where would people find you, Rob?
You can find me on Facebook. My phone number is plastered. We're about to start a podcast too as well that will be launching soon called It Gets Better. I'm the community outreach coordinator for Sunrise Detox in the counseling centers in Millbury, Massachusetts, but we have locations in substance use treatment all over the coast. You can look us up at sunrisedetox.com, and I'm available to help anybody that may be struggling or doesn't know that they're struggling yet, or your loved one.
Thank you, Rob. And Corey, the strength of a man. I can't thank you enough. And once again, your amazing wife for being there. It takes strong women and men to be in relationships, especially when we're all broken and all looking for something different. So, I'm glad that you had all these coaches out there as well to be a mentor to you as a young Black man. And now you're in return doing that to others as well, and being a father to your own kid and a husband to your wife. So tell us what you would say to the youth that's growing up with some challenges and difficulties, and anything else you want to tell us tonight.
I would first say that everything I've gone through in my life as a young man, and that I've shared 10% of tonight, 10%, trust me, was pure hell. It wasn't God-like. It wasn't the way the plan was set to go with raising our young son. It wasn't supposed to go that way. But I said that to say this. Everything I tell you about, I have the strength to tell you about now because it looks so small now. It's such a distant memory because I continue to press on. I continue to seek happiness, seek better, learn more. But the best advice I can give people now is get outside of yourself, get outside of you and be open to constructive criticism about you. And we have this thing with women that, what can she tell me? She can tell you a whole lot because they're going to be honest with you. They're going to be honest. Until you can listen to someone providing a solid level of profile of you can't get any better. You can't learn, you can't move on. You got to get out your own way. And one of the most impressive things tonight that, I get from these guys and they're giving back, these other two amazing men, is that you don't always get from men. And it's vulnerability. Is being able to say, I was messed up. A lot of men won't admit that. They'll just harbor it and move on and plaster it with rods. Lazarus said drugs, or plaster it with sex, or plaster it with money, fame. But you're still that guy that's broken inside. Best advice. And I tell my kids all the time, my players, when you're driving down the street, there's a big windshield in the car. It's a huge windshield. There's a small mirror in the middle, rear view. You got two side mirrors. They're also very small. But that windshield is huge. Keep your eyes on the road. Every now and then peek back just so you don't forget. Just so you don't forget. But those mirrors are small for a reason. You're not supposed to stare too long, because if you stare too long, you're going to run into something, okay? So you keep your eyes going forward. Press on. Things will change. Seek more. Be better. Learn more. Fix you. You got to do that. Because until you can fix you, you won't be able to receive love. You got to be open and ready to receive it. And as Lazarus talked about, God saved me because he softened my heart so I was able to receive. And that's where you got to get to.
Thank you. Truly honored to have you on tonight as well, Corey. And Lazarus, tell us about you, what you want to say to our youth, and how would we find you as well?
First of all, my ministry is I Am Swag. I have on a shirt now, and I'm blessing you, Don, Corey, and you, Rob. Y'all DM me y'all's address, and I'm gonna send you one of the shirts.
Yeah, I like that shirt.
For I am seeking wisdom and God's guidance. And if you look at the shirt, the G is the only thing that stands out on the shirt, which is God. And that should be who stands out into your life. And you can reach me. I'm on Facebook. The page is I Am Swag. And if I had anything to tell the youth or just adults, period, is the first thing is know who you are in Christ. Know who God says you are. If you're a Christian, know who God says you are, so that the world won't dictate on who you'll become. Because I think that's where a lot of us fall prey to the world, and become products of our environment or products of our situations, not just in the neighborhoods, inside the homes. We can be products of that if we don't understand who we are and who God said we are. I like what Corey said when you asked him, Don, well, what made you strong enough to get through all this thing? And he said it was simple. It was football. He found something that he could find love, passion, and find what he was looking for to identify with to get him through. And he was able to mentor the youth, the same strength where he got, he was able to give that same strength back to the youth. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. They're looking for these off the wall things to beat addictions and get through all these things. And it can be the simple thing, but it's got to be about you on what's going to get you through, not what got everybody else through. And the only way to know what'll get you through is if you know who you are. And the last thing I would like to say is, I minister through the youth, and I reach the youth because I reach them. I go where they are. I meet them where they are. I don't wait for them to come to me. All right. If we're going to be the help, we need to go where it's needed. So I try to meet them where they are, with their music. I do the gospel hip hop to try to reach them. Whatever I have to do to get on their level to reach them with the word, that's what I do. Again, I'm happy to be here, y'all, man. I really enjoyed you two brothers. Don, I really enjoyed this show. This was a great show.
Thank you. And once again, we do want to thank all three of you, three different journeys, all inspiring, all strong men. We don't have to have gone through addiction ourselves to connect with what you're saying tonight. You know, I want to speak to women that are going through domestic violence, children that are suffering at the hands of domestic violence. And as Rob mentioned, Laverne Gordon is one of the young ladies out there that, you know, has her foundation, Love Life Now, supporting women through that. And there's so many people that are out there to help. You guys are out there to help. You're helping in your community. You're helping by being here, having these real talk, real conversations, because we're also hurt. And one of the other things you guys mentioned is fixing yourself. I always say this, and Michelle, who helps with this show, always gets on me, but we're phenomenal beyond measure. And I truly believe that, because if you take a lot of us and what we've gone through in life and how we've been able to recover, and like Corey said, you look back every now and then and remind yourself where you're coming from, and I've had some conversations with my brother who went through my journey of domestic violence with our dad as well. And we have those conversations like, golly, how did we get through? And then we realize that who we are today, it made us better parents for our kids, because we're phenomenal with our kids now. And that's because we choose to break those cycles, and we choose to be stronger, and we choose to lead by example and have these conversations. So I can't thank you enough for impacting lives tonight, because that's truly what you did. And I hope we meet again. And I can't thank you enough. I'm honored to be in your presence. So thank you. Have a beautiful night, all. Thanks, and we're all imperfect. And I'm so glad we could share with you tonight. Have a wonderful week and continue to be amazing. One love.